Let's get right into it. We think of radiation as something from a sci-fi nightmare. Mushroom clouds, yellow hazmat suits, and Geiger counters clicking frantically. But what if I told you that you're soaking in radiation right now? Not from some leaky power plant, but from places you go every day, things you touch, and even things you eat. Science says there are perfectly normal spots all around us quietly emitting radiation. Most are harmless, but a few, well, they're weirdly unsettling. Number 9. The friendliest radioactive fruit. What do a banana, a potato, and a lima bean have in common? They are all perfectly healthy. Common foods. They are also all naturally radioactive. Let's focus on the banana, the poster child for radioactive snacks. This isn't some conspiracy theory, it's basic biology. Bananas are rich in potassium, a tiny, naturally occurring fraction of all potassium is an isotope called potassium-40, and potassium-40 is unstable. As it decays over its billion-year half-life, it releases a tiny, harmless particle of radiation. Every single banana you've ever eaten has zapped you with a minuscule dose of radiation. In fact, you are radioactive yourself because your body needs potassium to function. Scientists even have a playful term for it, the banana equivalent dose, or BED, used to explain radiation doses to the public. The radiation from one banana is so insignificant that it's like worrying about drowning in a single drop of rain. You would need to eat about 10 million bananas in one sitting to get a fatal dose of radiation. And by that point, the radiation would be the absolute least of your medical problems. It's a perfect reminder that the word radioactive doesn't automatically mean dangerous. Sometimes it just means a banana. Number 8. The banana's angry cousin. If the banana is the friendly, harmless example of radioactive food, then the Brazil nut is its bigger, angrier, slightly more intimidating cousin. While they won't make you glow in the dark, these nuts are one of the most radioactive food sources on the planet, easily blowing the banana out of the water. They can be up to 1,000 times more radioactive than other foods. So, what's their secret? It's not just about potassium. Brazil nut trees have an incredibly extensive and deep root system that sprawls through the South American soil. This soil happens to be naturally rich in radium, a potent radioactive element. The tree's roots are exceptionally good at absorbing minerals, and they mistakenly absorb radium right along with the barium they actually need. The tree can't tell the difference, and this radium gets concentrated in the part of the tree we like to eat, the nut. Eating just one Brazil nut gives you a bigger dose of radiation than eating an entire bunch of bananas. Still, the dose is tiny in the grand scheme of things. You're exposed to more background radiation just living your life for a day. But it's a weird thought, isn't it, that this premium health food is secretly hoarding a radioactive element from deep within the earth, all because its roots are a little too greedy? Number 7. Your cat's private beach. Let's move from the kitchen to the corner of your laundry room. We're talking about the litter box. That unassuming tray of clay granules your cat uses as its personal toilet is, believe it or not, another source of household radiation. The key ingredient in most clumping cat litter is bentonite clay, a highly absorbent material that's great for its intended purpose. But like granite, this clay is mined from the earth, and it brings some of its geological history with it. Bentonite clay naturally contains trace amounts of uranium and thorium, the same radioactive elements we found in Grand Central's walls. As these elements decay, they emit low levels of radiation. When you're scooping Fluffy's business, you're technically handling radioactive material. Now, before you start sourcing a tiny hazmat suit for your cat, relax. The levels are extremely low, so low that they pose no real threat to you or your pet. You get more radiation from taking a single flight. But it's another perfect example of how radiation is just a natural, unavoidable part of our world, found in the most mundane and, in this case, least glamorous products in our homes. Your cat's litter box is less of a nuclear threat and more of a smelly one. Number 6. The guardian in your hallway. Every home has one, chirping annoyingly when you burn toast and standing as a silent guardian against a real fire. We're talking about the smoke detector. It's a life-saving device. But one of the most common types holds a strange secret: it needs a tiny amount of radioactive material to work. Specifically, americium-241, a man-made radioactive isotope. This is for a type called an ionization smoke detector. Inside, there's a small chamber with 2 electrically charged plates. The tiny piece of americium-241 constantly emits alpha particles. These particles knock electrons off the air molecules inside the chamber, creating a steady, tiny electric current between the plates. When smoke particles enter the chamber, they disrupt the flow of ions, the current drops, and the alarm blares. But wait, Did I say you have a radioactive element produced in a nuclear reactor sitting on your ceiling? Yes. Americium-241 is an alpha emitter. Alpha particles are the heavy, clumsy bullies of the radiation world. They are so weak they can't even penetrate a piece of paper, let alone your skin. The only theoretical danger would come if you decided to break the detector open, pulverize the source, and then inhale it. The biggest threat from your smoke detector remains its uncanny ability to scare you to death at 3 a.m. Number 5. Grandma's glowing dinner plates. There's a certain charm to vintage items, old furniture, classic cars, retro dinnerware. But some of that retro charm comes with a hidden, radioactive glow. Between the 1930s and the 1970s, ceramic makers had a secret ingredient for creating intensely vibrant colors, especially a famous, sought-after orange-red. That ingredient was uranium oxide. The most famous example is the original Fiesta Red Fiestaware. These plates, bowls, and pitchers are radioactive enough to make a Geiger counter scream. This wasn't some trace contaminant. The glaze was up to 14% uranium by weight. It was loaded. The uranium created a beautiful, deep color that people loved, all while silently emitting alpha, beta, and gamma radiation. Imagine eating your breakfast cereal out of a bowl glazed with uranium. Now, the scientific consensus is that eating off these plates is probably fine. The uranium is vitrified, or locked into the glass of the glaze. However, if the plate is chipped or cracked, or if you're eating highly acidic foods off it, there's a small chance of leaching some of that uranium into your meal. The real risk was to the factory workers who handled the raw uranium powder daily. So, while you probably shouldn't use that vintage Fiestaware for your daily spaghetti, it's a fascinating and slightly unnerving piece of history that gives a whole new meaning to a dish to die for. Number 4. Flying the radioactive skies. You're buckled into a cramped airplane seat, ready for a 6-hour flight. You've got your neck pillow, your headphones, and a healthy dose of resignation about the food. But as the plane ascends to its cruising altitude of 35,000 feet, you are flying into a far more radioactive environment than the one you left on the ground. The invisible passenger on every flight is cosmic radiation. The Earth is constantly being bombarded by high-energy particles from the sun and deep space. Down here on the surface, our planet's thick atmosphere and magnetic field act as a powerful shield, protecting us from the worst of it. But the higher you go, the thinner that shield becomes. At cruising altitude, you are exposed to significantly higher levels of cosmic radiation. A single flight from New York to Los Angeles can expose you to a bigger dose than you'd get from a dental X-ray. This is why airline pilots and cabin crew are officially classified as radiation workers in many countries. Their annual exposure is carefully monitored because they spend so much time getting zapped by the cosmos, for the average passenger taking a couple of flights a year. The dose is completely negligible and not a health concern. The risk of deep vein thrombosis from sitting still for too long is a much more immediate threat. Still, it's a fun fact to ponder. While you sip your ginger ale, you're not just traveling across the country. You're getting a gentle dose of outer space for free. Number 3. The secret ingredient in your bones. This one isn't a place you can visit, because you're already there. It's inside your own body. Every person alive contains a secret, man-made ingredient, a permanent souvenir from the height of the Cold War. During the atmospheric nuclear weapons tests of the 1950s and 60s, hundreds of bombs were detonated, blasting enormous amounts of radioactive fallout into the upper atmosphere. This dust, containing isotopes like cesium-137 and strontium-90, was carried around the globe by wind currents and settled everywhere, on our fields, in our water, and into our food chain. Here's the creepy part. Strontium-90 is chemically similar to calcium. When it entered the food supply, especially through milk from cows grazing on contaminated grass, our bodies couldn't tell the difference. We absorbed it, and our bodies deposited it directly into our bones and teeth, where it remains to this day, slowly decaying. In fact, scientists leading the Tooth Fairy project in the 60s collected baby teeth from children and used the level of strontium-90 to prove to the government that fallout was a global problem, helping to push for the partial test ban treaty. You are a walking, talking piece of historical evidence. The levels are now very low and considered harmless. But it's a sobering thought that we all carry the microscopic scars of nuclear history locked away in our skeletons. Number 2, the Mile High City. When you're picking a place to live, you might consider job opportunities, schools, or the cost of housing. You probably don't pull out a Geiger counter. If you did, you might think twice about moving to Denver, Colorado. The mile-high city isn't just high in altitude, it's high in background radiation. A typical resident of Denver gets zapped with about twice as much radiation annually as someone living at sea level in New York or Los Angeles. There are two reasons for this. The first is what we discussed on the airplane cosmic rays. Being a mile closer to the sky means there's a mile less of atmospheric shield protecting you from space radiation. The second reason is the ground beneath your feet. Denver is nestled against the Rocky Mountains, a geological region rich in uranium-bearing granite. This means higher levels of terrestrial radiation and a greater risk of radon gas seeping into homes from the soil, so you're getting it from above and below. Despite these measurably higher levels, decades of public health data have not shown a corresponding spike in cancer rates that can be pinned on the background radiation. It seems that the human body is remarkably good at repairing the kind of low-level, chronic damage caused by this environment. It's a stark reminder that while the numbers can sound scary, the biological reality is often far more complex. The Rocky Mountain High might just be a little bit radioactive. Number 1. The neighborhood that shouldn't exist. So what's the most radioactive place on Earth you can actually live? You're thinking Chernobyl or Fukushima. Right, wrong. It's a series of quiet residential neighborhoods in the city of Ramsar, Iran. People here have lived for countless generations in an environment with the highest levels of natural background radiation ever documented on the planet. Some spots in Ramsar are so hot, they would trigger an immediate evacuation in almost any other country. The source is the local hot springs. The spring water is rich in radium that it picks up from deep underground. And this radium has contaminated the soil and even the building materials for centuries. The travertine used to build local homes is itself highly radioactive. Residents of these areas can receive an annual dose that is more than 10 times the accepted international limit for the public. That is far more than a nuclear power plant worker is legally allowed to receive. And now for the ultimate paradox. According to all our standard models, these people should have significantly higher rates of cancer, but they don't. In fact, studies of the Ramsar population have found no statistically significant increase in cancer mortality. Some controversial studies even suggest their immune systems have become more effective at cellular repair, a debated phenomenon called radiation hormesis. It's a place that spits in the face of our linear, all radiation is bad models, revealing that the relationship between life and radiation is far stranger and more mysterious than we ever thought possible. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.